The aftermath of the Singapore Grand Prix had more drama than the race itself. While the pit lanes were already empty and the winners were spraying their champagne, Lewis Hamilton sat in a cool gray room in front of the FIA stewards. The seven-time world champion had to justify himself for a series of rule violations that ended up costing him dearly. Subscribe now to not miss any FIA decision and any hidden truth behind the scenes of Formula One. Hamilton had crossed the finish line in 7th place, only 0.4 of a second ahead of Fernando Alonso. But what looked like a victory in a hard-fought duel turned into frustration. Race control identified several instances where Hamilton had left the track while battling massive brake problems. The verdict? 5 seconds time penalty, enough to drop him behind Alonso. The incident began in the final laps when Hamilton was struggling with overheated brakes. The onboard footage showed sparks flying, smoke developing, and a pedal that kept dropping further. Nevertheless, Hamilton kept pushing, chasing aggressive lap times and trying to keep the charging Aston Martin behind him. During this phase, he repeatedly left the track, cutting corners and going far beyond the curbs. For Fernando Alonso, this wasn't a front. Already during the race, his radio exploded with one of the most emotional reactions of the weekend. "Damn shit, I can't believe it," screamed the two-time world champion as he crossed the finish line, repeating it a full 4 times. Then he added, half ironic, half outraged, "Is it actually safe to drive with 0 brakes?" These words were pure fuel on the fire of the discussion. Alonso was certain Hamilton had gained an advantage and race control had to act. After the race came the official appointment. Hamilton and a Ferrari representative, his current team, appeared before the stewards. The question was whether the repeated leaving of the track had occurred without justified reason. The FIA acknowledged that Hamilton indeed had a brake problem, but did not consider it sufficient excuse. The protocol was clear. A technical problem, however tragic it may be, does not justify permanent disregard of track limits. Hamilton accepted the verdict without opposition. No protest, no appeal, no public outrage. Just a brief comment to the cameras. "I seem to be with the stewards quite often lately." Then, in typical Hamilton fashion, he explained what had happened and how close the situation really was. "I had soft tires on, I was pushing hard, wanted to make up those 22 seconds. I saw the brakes getting hot, but the team didn't tell me they were already at the limit. At turn 14, there were suddenly sparks, the pedal pressure dropped, and I was just glad to make the corner." He spoke calmly, but between the lines the old frustration resonated. Hamilton knows that his career is now in a different phase. He's no longer the untouchable champion, but a driver fighting for relevance, against younger, faster rivals and against a Ferrari team that is still searching for its identity. For Fernando Alonso, on the other hand, the evening was a late vindication. The subsequent correction elevated him to 7th place and confirmed his extraordinary form in a race that otherwise offered little excitement. The Spaniard, known for his sharp tongue, once again delivered radio gold. When his engineer gave him too many instructions, Alonso countered dryly, "If you tell me something after every lap, I'll disconnect the radio." And when he later showed a spectacular maneuver against rookie Isaac Hadjar, he reported again, "A trophy for the hero of the race," he said, with that typical mixture of pride and mockery for which fans and opponents alike love him. Alonso had every reason to be satisfied. His Aston Martin had been no podium candidate all weekend, but the veteran once again got more out of the car than seemed actually possible. And he did it his way. Uncompromising, aggressive, brilliant. For Hamilton, on the other hand, it was another chapter in a season that isn't going as he had imagined. After the emotional move to Ferrari, he had hoped for stability. Instead, he's fighting for points, against technical problems and against a car that rarely suits him. The penalty in Singapore perfectly symbolized this misery. An experienced driver giving everything, but in the end once again caught up by reality. So while Alonso accepted his promotion with a dry smile, Hamilton left the paddock with his head down. No drama, no uproar, just this quiet realization that the golden era is over. In Singapore, the race ended, but the aftermath had just begun. The 5-second penalty against Lewis Hamilton was more than just a correction on paper. It was a symbol of where the 7-time world champion currently finds himself, between the past of his glorious days and the present, where every mistake has consequences. For Ferrari, the evening was further proof that even legends are vulnerable. In Maranello, they had hoped that Hamilton would bring the team stability, experience, and leadership. Instead, in Singapore, they saw a driver struggling with a car that doesn't understand him, and with technology that lets him down at the crucial moment. His brake problems were real, but the consequences were equally real. Race control allowed no mitigating circumstances. Within the team, the mood is divided. While Charles Leclerc continues to try to establish himself as the internal reference, Hamilton finds himself increasingly on the defensive. The penalty in Singapore carries more weight than it seems at first glance. Because in Formula One, it's not just the points that count, it matters how you get them and how you lose them. Hamilton lost them with a mixture of desperation and experience. His maneuver of repeatedly leaving the track was not a sign of lack of control, but pure survival instinct. But it is precisely this instinct that is now being held against him. In modern Formula One, where every millimeter of driving is digitally monitored, there's no longer room for improvisation. Fernando Alonso used this moment to continue writing his own legend. The 44-year-old has long had nothing left to prove, and yet he drives as if he wants to show everyone once more. In Singapore, he was one of the few who created emotion from the monotony of the race. His radio messages, his biting manner, his fearlessness, they reminded why he is still considered one of the cleverest drivers in the field. When the official announcement came that Hamilton was penalized and Alonso moved up to P7, the reaction in the Aston Martin camp was mixed. Joy, yes, but also that quiet headshake, because it happened once again through others' mistakes. Alonso himself barely commented on it. He knows that points at this stage of the season are worth gold, but he also knows that the gap to the top teams is growing. Unlike Hamilton, Alonso seems free. He's not fighting against expectations, not against internal politics. He drives for what he loves, and you can tell. Hamilton, on the other hand, stands at a turning point. His move to Ferrari was supposed to make history. The Briton in red, the last great leap of his career. But instead, penalties are piling up, technical problems, and a public perception that is slowly shifting. Hamilton used to be the face of perfection. Today, he is a man who struggles against heat, against tires, against his own machine. The incident in Singapore is a microcosm of this development. The penalty didn't come because of a spectacular error, but because of small, repeated violations. It wasn't a crash. It was the slow, bitter slide of a driver who knows he could be better, but can't because circumstances are against him. And yet, when you watched Hamilton after the race, you saw something else. Dignity. No drama, no blaming. Just this mixture of pride and tiredness. "I was just lucky to make the corner," he said about the scene at turn 14. Between the lines, you could hear, he knows his instinct saved him, even though the rules penalized him. For fans, it was a reminder of why Hamilton, despite everything, still fascinates. He's no longer the invincible titan of old, but a man of flesh and blood, fighting with everything that once made him untouchable. Ferrari, meanwhile, now faces an uncomfortable question. How long will patience with the Hamilton 2.0 project last? The Italian press after the race was merciless. Un leone in gabbia chiosam, a lion in a cage, headlined La Gazzetta dello Sport. And that's exactly what Hamilton currently is, trapped between his own aspirations and the reality of his team. For Fernando Alonso, however, Sunday in Singapore was a late vindication. He overtook not only on track, but also in moral standing. His anger on the radio was raw but honest, and it brought movement to a race that would otherwise have been forgotten. If Formula One is a stage, then Hamilton and Alonso that evening were two actors in completely different acts. One fights against the end of an era, the other defies it. Both know they won't be here forever, but they show it in opposite ways. Hamilton with control and inner tension, Alonso with fire and defiance. In the end, Singapore won't be remembered for the winner, but for a moment that shows what Formula One is made of at its core. Pride, pain, rivalry, and the relentless will to keep driving despite everything.